Keep your earphones in. I had this habit of listening to music through earphones while I work. I think a lot of people do. It even made me sort of enjoy studying, which was a valuable asset to me as a pre-med major. You may have noticed the past tense and wondering why I stopped listening through earphones. Why? You might even be listening to music while reading this right now. I can't use my earphones now without jumping and looking around every now and then, especially when I hear small noises. Not since what happened 3 months ago. My therapist told me I should write this down. I only agreed because I think everybody should be warned. So, here goes. It was about 1:30 a.m. on the 1st of April. Yeah, April's Fool's Day. Precious few jokes had been played in my friend group that day, to which I was glad. I wasn't much of a jokester. That night, I was intent on completing my notes for chapter 10 of my biology textbook. Like I said, pre-med major, serious stuff. I had made a playlist on YouTube just for study purposes, sort of like my jam. Whenever I got to work, I would just throw that on shuffle and plug in my earphones, the cheap kind that doesn't completely block out sound. I did the same that night, humming along to the first song while scribbling things down. When the song ended, there was a pause. Expected, since some YouTube videos end with silence or start with silence. When the next song hadn't started for about 30 seconds, I looked up to check if the playlist was on autoplay. On the screen there was a video I didn't remember adding to the playlist. It was hazy gray static, like what would show if the video didn't exist, but those words weren't there. The title was, "Keep Your Headphones In." I smiled. I knew this must be a practical joke for my friends, some of who were very tech savvy, while I was completely hopeless. I decided to continue listening while taking notes so that I could reach the end when they revealed themselves on screen like April Fools, just to see what they came up with. There was silence for 1 more minute and a few seconds before I heard it. A rasping sound, like somebody trying to speak who hasn't spoken or drank water in years. A little wheezing followed. I was a bit scared, but I knew my friends were trying to scare me. After all, I was a resident scaredy cat of the group. Boy, was I excited to tell them that they couldn't fool me afterwards. A few seconds in, and heavy breathing joined the symphony. It just sounded like an old man who was out of breath, but with razor blades in his throat. There was some kind of scraping noise in the background. It was very weird. I wondered how they made that sound. At about 2:45, there was a loud creak, like a door opening. It sounded so real that I actually pulled my eyes away from my textbook to look at my dorm door, but it was closed tight. Obviously. I sighed. This noise was driving me insane. Then came the scratching. The breathing or whatever the hell it was became more erratic, interrupted with something like long fingernails against wood. Maybe even cat's claws. I was finding it harder and harder to concentrate on my work, but I didn't want to give in and admit to being scared. I checked the video. Goodness. There was more than 10 minutes left. I didn't have time for this. I decided to shut it off and go visit my good friend who lives down the hall, who I was sure was behind this, to tell her it was a good joke. Realizing my heart rate was actually faster, I pulled out the earphones and sat back. I took a few deep breaths and forced myself to smile. It was just a joke, although a pretty scary one. I looked back at the screen. It had turned black. As I stared at my earphones on the desk, I heard it. The scratching sounds. A home intruder came into my room one night. I'm a 23 years old woman, and this happened to me 9 or 10 years ago when I was a senior in high school. We lived in a pretty large house, but my siblings were all away to college or to boarding school, so it was only my parents and I in the house. I was a crazy light sleeper, so when I woke up in the dark and saw my alarm clock flashing at 3:11 a.m., I wasn't too surprised. However, I was wide awake, not just groggily stirring in my sleep. I lay there, wondering what had woken me, when I heard very soft footsteps on the stairs outside my bedroom. The door to my room was parallel to the left side of the bed, and I happened to be laying with my back to the door. When the footsteps approached my door, I thought it must be one of my parents checking on me for some reason. Then the doorknob was turned so slowly. Still, I thought they were just trying to not wake me. The door began to open, again, slowly and carefully. It made a creaking noise, no matter how slowly it was opened, so the person finally just shoved it the rest of the way to silence the creak. Still, my naive brain thought it was one of my parents until they clicked on a flashlight. I froze. Terror flooded me, and I remember that I instantly broke out in sweat. They were behind me, and I was facing away so they couldn't see my eyes wide open as they shone the beam straight on me. I always used to think that if something like that ever happened, I would be such a badass and I would whip out of bed and punch them, attack them, shout, scream, do something. But I could do nothing at all. All I could do was try to keep my breathing deep and even, despite the pounding of my heart, so that the intruder wouldn't know I was awake. After about 10 seconds, they finally moved the light away. I prayed and begged and bartered with anything that would listen to me as the intruder walked around my room, looking at my things. I could vaguely see their shape, large and bulky, like they were wearing two coats. They had a baseball cap on. They didn't shine the flashlight on me again, and after a few minutes, which felt like an eternity, they left my room. I could still hear them, though, walking around the rest of the second floor. Through my siblings' empty bedrooms, I was still sweating, still frozen in terror, not knowing what to do. I wanted to grab my phone and call my dad sleeping downstairs. I wanted to call our landline so that the phone would ring and wake my parents up. I wanted to call the police. I wanted to get up and run from my room. I wanted to cry. But I couldn't do any of those things. I was afraid that they would hear me, and I didn't know if they had a weapon or would try to hurt me or my parents. I wouldn't wish such helpless terror on my worst enemy. I don't know how, but I must have passed out from fear, or the adrenaline wore off and I fell asleep somehow, because the next thing I knew, it was 6 a.m. and I could hear my parents downstairs. I ran downstairs, and as calmly as I could, I asked them if one of them had been in my room last night. Their faces went blank. They said no, they hadn't. That was the last straw. I broke down in sobs and told them, "Then someone was in my room last night." Even as I type this, my hands have begun shaking and I've teared up. The police were called, even though there was little they could do about that point. Apparently, when my parents woke up, all of the doors to the outside were standing wide open, and there was a duffel bag at the bottom of the stairs. All that was inside was a coil of nylon rope and an empty USB flash drive. I don't want to think about what it was for. The intruder hadn't taken anything, and we have no idea why they left in what appeared to be a hurry. It took me about a week to be able to sleep in my own room, a sanctuary, which felt violated and frightening to me now. I carry pepper spray, sleep with a machete next to my bed, and double-check my locks every night. Hopefully, this will never happen again. But if it does, hopefully, I won't freeze. It's been 10 years, and my most common nightmare is that someone is in my room, standing in the shadows, watching me.